Hey guys, what's going on? Jeff here from Films at Home. In today's video, we have an awesome collaboration with another YouTuber who's named Serial at Midnight. I've been loving his channel for a long time, and we have a really cool two-part video, one part on my channel, one part on his channel, that I'm really excited to share with you guys. Hey everyone, so thanks for coming back to the channel today. This is the collaboration that I've been talking about for a little bit with another YouTube channel, and we are working with Serial at Midnight. He does a ton of cool stuff, not just movies, but all kinds of pop culture videos. But ultimately, he is also a huge movie fan like myself, and so we got talking on Instagram a little bit. I told him how I'd watched his channel for a while. He had watched mine. We wanted to collaborate on something, and so we kind of came up with this idea of, what are some really great movies that never even got a Blu-ray release. Now, some of these are on DVD, but as we're moving into 4K, we're kind of skipping over a bunch of very popular or maybe not so popular, but great movies that never even made it onto an HD format whatsoever. And so that's what we're going to talk about in the video. Part one here on my channel, I will list my 5 favorites that never got a Blu-ray release, and then part 2 will be on Serial at Midnight. You can go check out part 2 for his recommendations on 5 movies that he thinks should make their way to at least Blu-ray, if not 4K. So I was really excited to do this. I'll leave links down to his channel. Make sure you go over there and subscribe to him. Check out all of his content. He's got really cool stuff if you're at all into movies and pop culture, and I love the way he edits some of his videos. So always been somebody that I've kind of looked up to, and he's done a great job with his channel over the years, so I highly recommend it. Now, with that being said, let's jump into my list of the 5 movies that I think really need a Blu-ray release. So the first one on my list is Panic Room, which was directed by David Fincher, who is probably my favorite director of all time, and stars Jodie Foster and Kristen Stewart. Jared Leto's also in this, and then Forest Whitaker's in it as well. And so it has a really good cast. It's got a marquee director. If you don't know David Fincher, his movies are The Game, Gone Girl. He did Mindhunters on Netflix. He did The Social Network. He did Zodiac. I mean, this guy just pumps out hit after hit after hit. And for some reason, this movie with some pretty big name people in it never made it to Blu-ray. And there were rumors of a 4K, but I haven't heard anything confirmed yet. And so it's really interesting because of the cast and the marquee director that we've never seen that, but it is actually a really good thriller. If you like David Fincher movies, Panic Room is really well done. It's a little bit dated now with the technology that's used in the movie, but still a great thriller, absolute nail biter, really gritty, like home invasion type movie, but also sort of like a revenge. It's kind of like one of those movies like The Battered Woman who gets her revenge and stuff like that, but it's a really cool movie. Kristen Stewart and Jodie Foster are both great in it. They really carry the movie, and it's a really interesting concept. I can remember watching it when I was younger and like thinking that's crazy, like who has a panic room in their house, but it's a really interesting concept for somebody who's very wealthy, and it's not something you see every day, but taking that sort of idea and turning that into this home invasion movie where they didn't realize, oh, there's this panic room and we're trying to break out and they're trying to escape, and there's a lot of really cool things going on there. And as always, it's got David Fincher's signature style where it's pretty gritty, and the way he shot it is very much like his other movies. So if you like his stuff, especially like I would say The Game, Zodiac, or Gone Girl, probably the closest to this movie, I think you'll really like Panic Room. It's one to check out. You can get it on DVD, but it has no Blu-ray release, even though every other David Fincher movie has a Blu-ray release, and there's no plans for it to come out anytime soon from what I've heard. So that's one I really want to see on Blu-ray. The second one, this is another movie that a lot of people request along with The Abyss, and I'm not going to talk about The Abyss because I have seen on Instagram that that's been worked on for 4K, and so I'm pretty sure that's coming. But the other movie that I want to talk about from James Cameron, who also did The Abyss, is True Lies. And for some reason, this is like, I don't know why this never came out on Blu-ray, because it's the classic type of catalog title that the studios would go back to and James Cameron would go back to and re-release. because it stars Jamie Lee Curtis and Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's a big-time action movie. There's all kinds of effects, special effects. I mean, this movie, when it came out, was a blockbuster. This was James Cameron following up on Terminator 2, working with Arnold again. Jamie Lee Curtis at the time was still a very well-known and marketable star. I mean, this was a powerhouse movie that came out in 1994, and we've never had a Blu-ray or HD release of it on physical media, and I haven't heard any plans for it either. So it's another one of those where I'm like really confused. You've got the marquee director, you've got a great cast, you have an excellent concept for a movie. It's like pretty over the top. It's almost borderline like Fast and Furious levels over the top at times, but people love that stuff. It's an awesome action movie, and I just don't know why we never got that one on Blu-ray. So I'm really hoping that we can get that soon. Either maybe it jumps right to 4K, or we can at least get a Blu-ray release from somebody, but that's a movie that desperately needs one, desperately needs a good transfer, and desperately needs like a good Dolby Atmos surround soundtrack, or at least a very, well-mixed HD surround soundtrack, because it has awesome effects throughout. Now, the third movie on my list, and this is where we're going to get a little more obscure as we go down, but the third movie on my list is a movie called The Believer. And if you haven't heard of The Believer, it came out in 2001, and it stars a very, very young Ryan Gosling in one of his really first major roles. This was, at the time he had been in like Remember the Titans and had some minor roles, but I think this is one of his first serious major starring roles. And basically what the movie is the movie is about Ryan Gosling's character is kind of this right-wing extremist Nazi who starts recruiting people, around him and starts this kind of movement, but he's also struggling with the fact that he himself is Jewish. And so there's this kind of internal struggle. It's a really cool character driven movie. If you like Ryan Gosling, this was like I think his breakout role. He actually got a lot of attention for it. It went around the kind of film festival circuit back in the day. He never got I don't think he was ever nominated for an Oscar or anything, but I believe he won some awards at smaller festival circuits, and it got a lot of attention. And because of the subject matter, it is still as relevant today as it's ever been. I would liken it to something like American History X, but I actually think it is better than American History X, in my opinion, when tackling that subject. American History X is a very interesting movie, but I think The Believer does a better job of sort of tackling it. And The Believer is also based on a true story of this man who joined the KKK, I think, back in the 1960s. And then a New York Times article, I believe, came out and basically outed him as being Jewish. And he was a very high up KKK leader. And sort of, how can somebody do that? How can somebody be part of a minority group, or a group that's been hated on by these people, and still be a leader of that hate group? And so it's a really, really interesting story. And so they kind of took that and twisted it a little bit, where Ryan Gosling's character is a Nazi in a right-wing extremist Nazi party, but is also Jewish. So it kind of lines up a little bit better for the story than the true story, but it's a very interesting character study. Ryan Gosling does an awesome job, and it's never seen a Blu-ray release. So I'm really hoping, even as Gosling gets bigger and bigger, and he kind of hit his peak probably, 5 years ago, but he's still a very big name actor, and I think it's an excellent title that should be released and should be more widely available in the same way that American History X is, because I honestly think it's better. Just my opinion. You may think I'm crazy, but if you haven't seen the movie, I would say definitely give it a chance, and hopefully we'll see it on Blu-ray very soon. Now, my fourth choice is a bit of a controversial one, but it's a movie that I've been really hoping to see in some HD transfer, and was really thinking that Criterion Collection was going to do this for a long time. But it's the movie called Freaks from 1932. The thing that is, in my opinion, interesting about this movie is the fact that it uses real, I don't know what to call them, but I guess like circus performers. Obviously, they were called freaks, people who were in the freak show. None of that's really politically correct now, but it was also really interesting because they took those real people and put them in this movie, and it's sort of a horror movie as well, and it's one of the earliest horror movies, but it's controversial because of the subject matter and, you know, the way that these freak shows are now viewed. But, you know, it gave all these circus performers who were otherwise, you know, basically just laughed at and put up on stage to be gawked at. It actually gave them a chance to get into movies and maybe, you know, make some sort of a name for themselves and at least do something outside of just being put up in front of a bunch of people to stare at. And, you know, so that kind of, it's almost a little progressive in that point, but it's also very interesting to look at that time period and that kind of freak show, carnival, circus, that whole industry that was really popular back in that time. And it's actually got some very scary, creepy moments. There's some stuff that will shock you for 1932. You know, in today's world, it's not going to be the most shocking thing, but it's a very interesting movie. It tackles a very interesting part of American history, and it's a really kind of progressive and interesting concept for something from 1932 that's almost 100 years old. And so I'm really hoping that that could get an HD remaster. And I think Criterion Collection is the natural choice for it because it's sort of its importance in movie history. But I'm not sure, like, I haven't heard anything about it. I had heard rumors for a while that it was coming to Criterion. It hasn't yet. Sometimes they take a long time to put stuff out, and there's always rights issues, especially with older movies. You know, there's family members fighting over the rights to, it's Todd Browning, who is the director, and who knows what that situation's like. And the studios and infighting and rights issues and all licensing and all that sort of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see if it ever gets a release. I think it's the perfect one for Criterion Collection, or maybe an Arrow Video, or even like a Scream Factory could pick it up and do something, because it is a really important part of horror movie history as well as American history. I think it's very relevant, and so it's crazy to me that it never saw an HD release, and it certainly deserves a well-done Blu-ray from one of those premier studio distributors like Criterion or Arrow. Now, the last one on my list is a lesser-known George Romero movie called Martin. This was his follow-up to Dawn of the Dead, not his father. So he had already had Night of the Living Dead under his belt, and Martin was his follow-up to that. And so he's really starting to gain some notoriety, especially in the horror community. And Martin is a movie basically about this kid, and he thinks that he's a vampire. And I mean, he drinks people's blood. He claims he's 84 years old. And it's basically like a really interesting, it's a horror movie for sure, but it's also a really interesting look at like psychosis and like this kid who's almost like schizophrenic or has like multiple personalities, thinks he's a vampire, and kind of mental illness and how that can affect people and really cause like really crazy things like this to happen sometimes to certain people, and how you can get into that mindset. But he kind of approaches it all from a horror standpoint. There's a lot of like, there's a lot of allusions back to certain things that are happening in America at that time, kind of like post-Vietnam. There's all kinds of like allegories and metaphors throughout the movie, but it is a really good horror movie, and it's George Romero, and for whatever reason, his movies are having, now I know the issue with Night of the Living Dead because that was a crazy copyright issue. They never copywrote the film, and it had all kinds of rights issues before it got to Criterion with that nice remaster. But even think of like Dawn of the Dead, 1978, out of print, super hard to find on Blu-ray. Like, I don't know what goes on with his movies, why some of them are easy to find, some of them are super hard to find, but Martin's one that's gotten kind of lost. Most people think George Romero, they think zombies, but a lot of people, if you read reviews of Martin, they would say, you know, back in the day, even back in 1979 when it came out, that George Romero, quotes, has done for vampires what he did for zombies. Like, it's a really cool take. It's not Dracula, it's not Twilight. It's like this really gritty look at, you know, what if this person was an actual vampire, and wasn't this caricature of one, and was just kind of this bloodthirsty, crazed person. So it's a really cool horror movie from the late 70s. No Blu-ray out there, no plans of one from what I've heard, but I think it would be an awesome release for a Scream Factory or an Arrow Video. both of those distributors could nail this. It's probably going to be Scream Factory. That would be my guess, because they have the rights to other George Romero stuff. And so I'm hoping they're working on something, but that would be a really cool one. If you're a horror fan, you probably know about it. But if you're just a casual horror fan, maybe not. But go look it up. Go find Martin. It's one of George Romero's best films, and outside of the zombie genre, it might be his best one if you take away all the zombie movies. So certainly worth a watch, but definitely worth the Blu-ray release, and hopefully a nice remaster with some really cool extras, because it's an awesome movie. So that was my list. Those are my 5 that I'm hoping can really make it to Blu-ray sometime soon, that really deserve a Blu-ray release. I was a little bit skewed towards kind of horror, thrillers, and kind of psychological stuff, but those are the kind of movies I like. If you know me and you know my collection over the years, like I said, David Fincher is one of my favorite directors, and his stuff is very psychological, thriller based. I love horror movies. I have more horror movies than any other thing in my collection, and so naturally I was going to be skewed towards those in some way. But if you haven't seen any of these movies, you know, I highly recommend going and trying to find a way to watch them any way you can. I do believe that some of them are available on streaming platforms. Some of them are going to be harder to find. The Believer's really hard to find. Freaks is really hard to find. But I think you can find True Lies and Panic Room out there on streaming, or maybe on like an HBO. And then Martin, I'm not sure where that's available, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe something like Shudder had it, the streaming service for horror movies, or if one of the random streaming services out there have it. I honestly didn't do my research into it because they change too often, and who knows, if you're watching this movie 3 weeks from now, they might all be on different services. But if you can find them, definitely watch them. I highly recommend it. And there's a lot of great movies on this list, so hopefully we can kick up some more Blu-ray releases. We don't necessarily need 4K for all of these, and so hopefully the studios are still thinking about what needs a good HD transfer, and they're still working on a back catalog of Blu-ray before they bump into doing more 4Ks of existing Blu-rays. There's some stuff that needs to be addressed first in HD. So again, thank you for watching. For part 2 and for his recommendations, you need to head over to Serial at Midnight and check out his channel. I will leave a link in the description below. Definitely go check him out and subscribe and see what his thoughts are. I've already talked to him about his selections, and he has some really interesting stuff. He's got a little bit more of an eclectic taste than I do, and he's a little bit less mainstream. I thought my choices were a little mainstream, a little bit not, but they're things that I really wanted. And when he sent me his list, I was like, man, I could have thought a little bit harder about this, but I really like my 5, and his 5 are super interesting as well. So make sure you go see his video, check out all of his content, and subscribe. I'm really excited to work with him, and you'll see him talk about me on his channel and back and forth. So it's cool to collaborate with people like this. I'm really excited about this video. It's the first one of this kind that I've done. So if you like this sort of stuff, let me know in the comments, leave a like on it. If you want to see me do more stuff like this, definitely let me know. But I appreciate you all watching. Make sure you go over to Serial at Midnight for part 2, and I will talk to you guys very soon.